This is the Lakers Central Podcast, powered by Crossover Media. Get the best analysis on the 17-time world champion Los Angeles Lakers. Subscribe to Lakers Central on your favorite podcast app or listen at crossoverpodcast.com. Now, let's talk Lakers with your hosts, Alex and Vinay.
So, Vinay, I know your timeline was ablaze yesterday when Richard Jefferson started dropping some of the golden nuggets from the Road Trippin Podcast. How did you, before we dig into just some of the specifics, man, how did you feel about the interview overall?
I thought, well, first and foremost, glad to hear your voice again, Alex. We are, depending on when this pod drops, we are going to be 2 to 3 days away from the Lakers playing their first preseason game. Looks like we get no rest, and it looks like we're right back in it again, which is crazy to believe. But as you mentioned, yes, this information, Richard Jefferson, who apparently is a troll getting paid to be in NBA media, clearly by the way he is describing his motivations behind half the stuff he does from this interview, dropped that information in regards to, he dropped clips of just some of the things from that second part interview, Road Trippin Podcast with LeBron, and people were going nuts on the timeline. The comments about Giannis, the stuff about Kyrie, LeBron elaborating more as to what he was talking about when he said the Lakers franchise and he wants his respect. And the one thing that always seems to get the timeline in a frenzy is when he acknowledges that he reads every nonsense thing, or he gets sent all the nonsense stuff that people say about him on the timeline. It's almost like it's almost like when you're in school and you think you're messing around with your friends and you think your teacher's not watching, and then when the teacher publicly calls you out, not to discipline you, but just says, "Oh, I know what you're doing. And I'm fully aware you've been doing this the whole time," and the embarrassment you feel. I feel like NBA Twitter is that classroom setting, and everybody thinks that these athletes, and it's not just LeBron, it's all athletes, but obviously because LeBron's the biggest athlete, it's LeBron turns and looks at NBA Twitter and says, "Oh yeah, I've been reading everything you guys have been saying about me," and then all of a sudden the timeline gets defensive and it turns into a frenzy, and then you get the Bron crowd versus the anti-Bron crowd, and then you get people who are other fans of other specific players like KD and Steph. They all jump in, the Kawhi group, the Clipper group, they all jump into these different conversations depending on what the topic is. But I will say this second segment of this podcast is one hell of an advertisement for LeBron's alcohol, his tequila company. Yeah. So he did a wonderful job being candid in this interview.
By the way, LeBron, if you ever hear this, man, send us a couple bottles of that. We'd appreciate it. But I don't know why fans are surprised that LeBron or any of these athletes pay attention to what's said about them in the media or on social media. Kevin Durant obviously had, burner accounts and was responding to fans, and now happens to have a podcast with one of the dudes who he was going back and forth with on Twitter. Michael Jordan famously paid attention to everything, even pre-social media, that was said about him. And, he took everything personal, right? And so did Kobe and all these athletes. So I like the way that LeBron responds to things. He's pretty measured in how he responds because he knows that things that he says will be taken out of context. And he mentions in the interview, that's one of the reasons he started Uninterrupted, because he was tired of people just taking 2 minutes of what he said versus the entire segment. So, let's jump into this interview he did with Richard Jefferson and all the other hosts from Road Trippin, man. And let's just jump off of probably some of the hotter things that were discussed on the timeline the last 24 to 48 hours. LeBron responded to Kyrie saying that when he looks down at the other end of the bench and sees KD, now he has another guy that can hit a big shot for the first time in his career. So let me play a little bit of that clip and then kind of give me your thoughts, Vinay, on what you read from LeBron. So let me play a little bit of that.
Podcast, one of our other the original Kyrie, our guy on the podcast, guy that hit the biggest shot of my career. No offense.
Nah, for sure.
No. But there was a comment there about him during the finals where he was talking about he was always the best option and for like a late game shot, which we know Kyrie is a monster late game. That's not even a question.
Right.
But he said, like, this was the first time playing with KD that he looks down the line and there's somebody else that can also make said shot.
There was a clip out during the finals before one of the most clutch shots in NBA history where I'm telling T. Lue to go to Kyrie.
I tweeted that.
Yeah, go to Kyrie because I knew the matchup that he was going to get. So when I heard the comment that Kyrie made, I wanted to, one, not only find the whole transcript, but also call my people, send me the whole transcript. And I heard he did it on Katie's podcast. And I was a little like damn.
Yeah.
Once I got the whole transcript, I was like, damn.
It sounds like LeBron might have genuinely been hurt, man, by Kyrie's comments. Like, he starts off by giving Kyrie a ton of compliments, a lot of credit for how good he is as a player. And then it's just kind of like, why would Kyrie even make those comments when I'm in the finals? Like, what do you make of all of that?
I think if you had to show that clip, and this is basically what happened. This is what I was seeing on my timeline yesterday. Yesterday, I saw some folks saying that LeBron's actually a humble guy. He's arrogant, obviously, to some degree, because he considers himself one of the greatest players of all time, which comes with the territory. You can't be the best and not acknowledge, like, not act like you're the best. That's kind of, it comes with. It's very hard to crush your ego completely in that regards, in a sport like this with the notoriety that it has. The folks that are the LeBron folks would turn around and say, this guy is clearly a humble guy. He wants to see his teammates succeed. That's a theme that we also saw as Laker fans in year one with LeBron and AD. LeBron was constantly saying, AD is the future. This is AD's team. We need to build around Anthony Davis. It's something that he said all regular season, all playoffs, and it's something that he's still saying now. That should be the goal. That should be the way the Lakers build around Anthony Davis. That's what the LeBron folk were saying. LeBron's been consistent in that kind of behavior. And he was consistent with Kyrie. That's what LeBron is saying in this segment. And you take this clip and you give it to the anti-Bron section of Twitter, and it's all fake. It's all propaganda. It's all, it's all him trying to make himself be the victim. Kyrie's the bad guy because he's talking badly on Bron, even though Bron's been positive about him. People pulling receipts of LeBron in 2016-17. LeBron folk were saying he was saying this back 3-4 years ago. So it's not something that he's making up after the fact, after these comments came out. It's something he was saying in real time in Cleveland. And it's hard to know, right? Because this is one of those exercises that fans do. And it's like, I don't know. It's NBA Twitter's favorite exercise. It's to psychoanalyze somebody's real motivations behind what they're saying and why they're saying what they're saying. And no bigger person than LeBron to do that with. It's something that's been constantly happening with Kevin Durant. Literally every time he opens his mouth about anything. It does seem, if I had to take either, just looking at it objectively, it seems like LeBron is like, I don't know if he's hurt, because hurt would imply like he had a lot of stock in Kyrie's opinion of himself. I don't think LeBron has a lot of stock in what Kyrie's opinion of him is. But I think as a teammate, there was some stock that LeBron had in Kyrie as a person. We know that famously Kyrie and LeBron didn't see eye to eye in regards to leadership. Kyrie wanted to be the guy. He wanted to be known as the guy. That's why he was okay with going to the Celtics. We also know that when he was with the Celtics, he voluntarily told the media that he called LeBron to tell him, now I understand how difficult it is to get young guys to get on board with you, because now he has to do it himself. So, it's, again, this is one of those things where I wouldn't say that Kyrie was being malicious when he said what he said. I think he was just looking at it like compartmentalized within the team. Maybe back when he was in Cleveland, he felt that he didn't, LeBron wasn't the late shot game maker. Obviously, there's tons of statistics to say that LeBron is one of the best clutch time performers in league history, even compared to guys like Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan, Steph, Kyrie himself. So there's no statistical, what's it called? There's no statistical reason for him to say that, or no factual reason for him to say that, because it's not true. But I think this was one of those, Kyrie was in the moment, did that interview, said those comments. I thought the one thing that was interesting that RJ brought up is that when that dropped, that snippet or whatever dropped, right when the Lakers were like in the middle of the finals or right before the finals or something like that.
Yep.
And LeBron almost mentions it like, oh, was he trying to play a game? Like trying to get inside my head to kind of throw me off my game knowing I was going into the finals. Because that sort of brings up like that competitive aspect of it, right? Like playing mind games with each other. We've heard about NBA players doing stuff like that, saying certain things in the media, saying certain things on the court to try and get inside people's heads. Obviously, Kyrie wasn't in the bubble. The Nets were nowhere near the finals. But is Kyrie a malicious guy when he does that sort of stuff? I don't think so. I think it was just a genuine thing he said. I think the problem is that as these guys mature, as NBA players mature, we treat them like prior to them maturing in the way they think about stuff, I think we look at I think we give this this criteria or like this standard. Like Bron can when Bron was talking about Jeannie Buss, and I'll give you an example of what this is. When Bron was talking about Jeannie Buss being the first female owner to win a championship, first female governor to win a championship, like pioneering that space, he immediately remembered Tom Benson's wife in New Orleans, and I think one other female-led ownership group somewhere else. Like he corrected himself in the moment, saying that Jeannie Buss isn't the only female owner, but she's the first one to win a championship, and that's a big deal for the Lakers. It's a big deal for the league. That awareness of like remembering all of these different things and remembering that there's owners and stuff like that, not every NBA player has that. And I don't know if Kyrie, like maybe in the moment he didn't think of it. It was absent-minded, but he already recorded it. He wasn't going to go back and re-record it. I don't know if Kyrie was being malicious. But to answer your original question, I think Bron was hurt that Kyrie didn't remember him because it's LeBron. You played with you're gonna play with like the greatest player of all time. You're gonna say that when you retire, and I think that's what probably bothered LeBron. That like I would understand if LeBron was somebody lesser than what he is, right? Lesser than KD. If Kyrie was playing with somebody who's not as good as KD and stuff like that, who may have still been a big shot maker. But I mean, for all intents and purposes, by the end of LeBron's career, he's going to go down as probably the greatest player of all time. And it's kind of hard to forget that, like when you're having any conversation about basketball success. So I think that's what probably bothered him the most, that like, even in that moment, you couldn't remember me or deliberately remember me. I'm giving Kyrie the benefit of doubt, saying that he wasn't doing it on purpose, but I don't know, All
right. Well, I'm not giving him the benefit of the doubt. All right. Listen, man, you and I have been recording podcasts for years, and like I know, if someone says something salacious, it's a podcast. You have a moment to like, you can edit it out, right? You can rephrase it, right? Yeah. And if you say something salacious, usually the other host or the other guys in the room are like everyone's face might, if you're all in the same room, or everyone's kind of like, oh, did he just say that, right? Like when he made that comment, I'm sure Kevin Durant and everybody else there was probably like, uh-oh, like this is going to go viral, which is probably why they left that particular comment in the podcast, right?
I think that was the teaser that they used. Shout out to Eddie. It's Bansky. His Twitter thing is Bansky. Boogie Buzzins. He's the guy that you were talking about working with Katie.
They knew exactly what they were doing. So that could have been edited out, number one. Number two, you don't make that comment, to your point, like J.R. Smith has hit big shots throughout his career, right? But let's say J.R. Smith was the best big shot maker that Kyrie had ever played with. Okay, you get to play with someone like KD. I get it. But when you play with LeBron James, and when you look at just NBA players historically, LeBron James, like you said, he may very well go down as the greatest player of all time. Kyrie Irving, on the other hand, I don't even know if he goes down as a top 50 player. Probably not. He's probably not going to be remembered, assuming Brooklyn doesn't win a couple championships. I don't really know if Kyrie goes down as a top 50 player. So they're in two completely different leagues. when it comes down to historical relevance with basketball. For guys to get in each other's heads, which players do, but usually it's against like an opponent when you're actually playing each other in the finals or a playoff series. Not when one guy's at home chilling and another guy is actually in the bubble playing for a championship or getting ready to play for a championship. Kyrie takes these shots, and look, there's a lot of Kobe and Kyrie. Like, we know that Kobe is basically Kyrie's mentor. Kyrie really loved Kobe. And we know that Kobe and Shaq famously had their feud. But one of the biggest differences between Kobe and Kyrie is, one, as talented as everyone wants to say Kyrie is, I don't think that he's as talented as a Kobe Bryant, nor is he 6'6". And there's just a number of other reasons why Kobe and Shaq might have been able to kind of have some issues and still win, while Kyrie and LeBron won and then had to go their separate ways because they couldn't get along. And Kyrie has since kind of worn out his welcome in Boston. And I'm a defender of Kyrie in that it's not all his fault that the thing didn't work well in Boston. I'm not a big believer in Danny Ainge. There were other issues there, as we've seen with him kind of trading players like their basketball cards. I don't know if I believe that things will go so great in Brooklyn. Kevin Durant and Kyrie are both interesting fellows, to say the least. So I think Kyrie was purposely taking a shot at LeBron. And to me, if you have to do that, man, like, what are we doing? Like to do that. So you're coming off of the bubble and Kyrie makes these comments, and then they get a rookie head coach in Steve Nash, and then Kyrie makes another comment about, well, I don't really see us as needing a head coach. It's kind of a collaborative effort. And then you get to this season starting, and he's not going to talk to the media, which I'm okay with him not talking to the media. But, like, you keep making these comments. You can't make comments like that and then run away from them.
Well, I will say after that comment, whether it was strategic or not, about KD being the guy that he was, and being the shooter that he was, Kyrie went to Instagram and did that whole thing where he was just like, why must it be brother against brother? It's the media that's, pitting one guy against the other and that sort of thing. And it's just like, I saw that and I was just like, all right, this is damage control. Like, what you said, and you know what the elephant in the room always is going to be. And maybe he just doesn't like it. I know that's the way I see it. Go ahead.
See, that's the, like, I agree the media does try to turn these players against yourself. Like, I agree with that part, except you were on your teammates' podcast, and this was the trailer they led with to launch that podcast.
For sure.
Right?
Yeah.
So you can't go and blame the media when this is your boys' podcast. Like,
yeah.
That's where you lose me. And so here's LeBron responding.
Oh, so I was going to say one thing that I did very much appreciate that LeBron said, which I hope one day NBA Twitter reaches this level, which I'm sure it won't, because ESPN and all these other media companies insist on making more clickbait and more, engagement bait kind of stuff, is he said, when I saw the comment, I made sure to go get the entire transcription of what he was saying, just so I knew exactly what he was saying. And then he talked about how he felt about it. More people, I am glad that LeBron did, and you mentioned it. That's why he started uninterrupted. So people would have to listen to the entire thing. You can't just take snippets out, and it's more nuanced and contextual stuff. But I hope that people start doing that more and more. I think for Laker Nation specifically, we have our own most polarizing player on the roster, Kyle Kuzma. And even from the first round of interviews earlier, just a few days ago, when he was asked in regards to the whole, like, what do you think about Luka Doncic's comments? Mm-hmm. Like, I understand Laker media, and if you guys are listening to this, we appreciate all the work that you guys do. But, like, the people who are trying to get those quotes out as quickly as possible, like, you have to be like, you have to have some sort of awareness where you turn around and go, look, this is a very sensitive subject. Let me make sure I get this right, or else I'm putting this player in a very difficult position to answer something that he never actually said. And I hope NBA Twitter gets to the point where they actually start reading stuff with context, like the entire transcriptions. They won't, I'm sure, because people don't want to. But I'm glad that Bron said that, because I think that was like an underrated part of his, like, response to everything that went on. Like, he could have flew off the handle immediately, but he didn't. He's like, I wanted to make sure I understood completely what he was saying, and I thought that was good.
LeBron is clearly a savvy media person himself. Like, he gets it.
Yeah.
But Kyrie's also been in the limelight long enough where he's supposed to get it also. He's 28 years old. He's not 19 first, just coming into the league, 12 games out of Duke. He should know better by now. And he doesn't seem to get it. And it's not going to get any easier in Brooklyn. Like, the spotlight's going to be on in Brooklyn this season. It'll be a little bit different just because of the pandemic and things going on with that. But, people are going to expect you to be good this year. And if you guys fall on your face or aren't as good as you're supposed to be, they're going to probably come for him maybe even more than KD, because KD's excuse is going to be, I'm coming off of a major injury. Like, that's going to be a built-in excuse.
Yeah, and I think this is like another one of those things where it's just like, we had this conversation on the NBA Weekly podcast. Like, one of the things that was in that Clippers article that was written in The Athletic was basically like Kawhi and Paul George avoiding the media by making, by being really late in coming to the media sessions and stuff like that after post games and stuff like that, which forced their teammates to be the ones to have to answer questions in regards to whatever happens on the court. That rubbed his teammates the wrong way. Like, so that there's like, we've gotten off tangent because we were talking about, the Kyrie's comments and how LeBron felt, but like, there is a human aspect. We say this every single time. There is a human aspect to being a teammate. It's not about whether you like me or you don't like me. It is your perception of it is the perception of you as a leader, as a player. If Kyrie is knowingly ignoring the fact that he played next to LeBron James when he's talking about Kevin Durant, and LeBron James is going to go down as the greatest player of all time, possibly by the end of his career. Like, and if your belief is that he did it on purpose, he knew what he was doing, then what does that mean for anybody that he's talking positively about in his current locker room? If he's going to Karis LeVert and saying, look, we're going to give you the ball, we need you to do it. And Karis, and if I was Karis, I'm not saying that this is going to blow up the Nets locker room. I'm not saying any of that stuff. I'm just saying, like, you can be carefree, you can be eccentric, you can have all those personality things. Be whoever you want, but you can't want the microphone when it comes to responding to people, and then like say things publicly and then be upset about how people respond to things that you say publicly. Like, or you know what? That's why I don't have a disagreement with him wanting to do a media blackout. But my thing is, you can't say that it's all the media's fault when these are your words, even when they're putting it in context, right? Like, if they release a whole transcript, like, and if LeBron read that whole transcript and he found out that you really meant what you meant, there was no confusion, there was nothing out of context that was placed there, then LeBron is right for feeling the way that he felt, right? And you can't blame LeBron for that. So that's the part that and then if you turn around later and go, well, that's, it's the media that put us against each other. Like, no, man. Like I said, if LeBron was not LeBron and he was some obscure small forward or some other guy that just happened to win a championship with Kyrie, who is not as good as Kevin Durant, that'd be fine. But you're playing with one. Like, imagine Scottie Pippen talking about playing the best players you play with and never mentioning Michael Jordan. That's nuts, right? Like, that's such a crazy thing to say. And I get it. Maybe for Kyrie it's annoying. He doesn't want to have to always mention LeBron every time he gives an answer. But he literally all he could have said is that, outside of LeBron, KD's the only other guy that I've ever played next to that I feel confident. Like, it's like 3 words. It's not that hard, but that's how it works, man.
Kyrie's just an interesting guy, man. And I want to take a break and get to the Clipper stuff since you brought them up. But you're right. Maybe he just kind of gets tired of having to answer questions because of, he only won with LeBron. But Dwayne Wade only won with LeBron, and he seems to be people don't only associate Dwayne Wade with LeBron James. Like, he was able to carve out his own career and still be a great player.
He won one with Shaq. He won in 2006, 2007 with Shaq. So, but obviously, a lot of people, like, there may be people out there that say, hey, Dwayne Wade doesn't belong to be as high up in the shooting guard rankings because, he doesn't belong to be high up in the shooting guard rankings because, he won 2 of them with LeBron. He clearly wasn't the best player. But obviously, he's carved out a name for himself as well. That sort of thing, like, I remember a long time ago, even last year, there was a conversation about, was Pau Gasol actually like a top-tier power forward when he joined Kobe Bryant?
Oh, he was. I remember when that happened. People were crazy.
Yeah, and like, people were like, and so there's a conversation like, oh, was it the Lakers that brought Paul Gasol up, or was it Kobe that was like there's a lot of stuff that goes on to stuff like that. But I understand the annoyance behind it, but at the same time, like some of this stuff is in their control, right? There are some things that are within Kyrie's power that can be taken care of, and some things that are not. I would just say in that very specific situation, that was all within his control. And it was something that could have easily been avoided, but it wasn't. And so now the follow-up response to it is LeBron feels some type of way about it. And it doesn't sound like LeBron's hurt, but it sounds like LeBron, at least in the moment, was like, all right. So now if LeBron says something back about Kyrie, which I don't think he will, but if he shows a little bit more animation or a little bit more reaction when they play the Nets and they blow him out, or if he's doing funny stuff, I'm sure the body language experts at ESPN and Bleacher Report are going to extrapolate as much as they can of it. That's what they did with Russell Westbrook and KD. That's what they did with Russell Westbrook and what's his name, Dame Lillard. It turns out those guys are like best friends, and Dame publicly said, "You guys are the ones who keep making this stuff up," but we're like great friends. So that's the kind of stuff that that's the kind of stuff that's going to happen from this. So it's great for NBA storylines, because now the Nets Lakers thing is going to be like the top matchup now this season.
Well, not only is that good for NBA storyline, so is LeBron actually speaking about the Clippers blowing their 3-1 lead, right? And we have them first scrimmage of the season, and then we're going to play them, I believe, on Christmas Day, right? No, we've got the Mavs on Christmas Day.
Yeah, we got the Mavs on Christmas Day. The rise of Luka Doncic will be televised in Los Angeles.
Luka's going down too. As long as LeBron and Anthony Davis are Lakers, I'm not worried about Luka.
I'm picking him. He's going to be my MVP pick this year. I think he's got all. We can talk about it some other time, but he's got all the hallmarks of an MVP candidate this year. As long as he stays healthy, they get like a 4, 5 or better seed. I think he's going to get it. But you can go ahead and play the clip. We'll go to the next segment.
He'll be in the running, definitely. And he might be very well the leader. So let's take a quick break, and Laker Central will be right back. Welcome back to Laker Central. So we've been talking about some of the quotes that have come out of the Road Trippin Podcast that LeBron was on, and so he mentioned the Clippers blowing their 3-1 leads. I'm going to play a little bit of that part of the interview right now.
Listen, we're watching the game. First of all, we're watching every game.
Yeah.
I mean, when they went up 3-1, they're up 17 in the third. We preparing, to possibly, we feel like it's a collision course. That's been a narrative all year
long.
Yeah. In Game 7, even what happened in Game, 5 and Game 6, like we were still preparing for the Clippers. Like I couldn't believe it. To this day, I still can't believe it.
Yeah.
Obviously, the better team won.
Yeah.
That's what happened. But still, like, because everything, all the talking that they were doing all year.
All the shit talk that they were doing all year, man. And they were talking. Now, he does go on to kind of exclude Paul George and Kawhi. I would not have excluded them. Screw that, because Paul George was definitely in those videos in Vegas, kind of bragging when he went to the Clippers. But it's funny that LeBron acknowledged, like, everybody was expecting the Lakers and Clippers to meet in the Western Conference Finals. And he saw that the Clippers were up 3-1, and even Game 5, Game 6, like, he thought the Clippers would pull it out, and they did not. And he said, look, the best team won. The Nuggets were the better team. So,
I mean, it's pretty clear that, in that video specifically, he, like you said, he tries to single out, or he tries to exclude out Montrez and Kawhi and Paul George. He's talking about Pat. Like, I know Lou Williams was part of that video too. Yeah. He's talking about Patrick Beverley. It's the only guy who was openly, like, and not just to the Lakers. He was doing it to everybody. Like, he has that famous thing where he's telling Steph that, like, the next 5 years are his, and Steph's like, bro, you're like 32 years old. What are you talking about? We know about the nonsense he was doing with Dame the last game, like in the tournament, in the bubble and stuff like that. So it's like, I understand why Pat Beverley does what he does. He's a tenacious player. I think his personality is bigger than his game. is. And a lot of people say that the reason why he does that is because he's from Chicago. That's how
Yeah.
Chicago guys are. But at the same time, there's always like a limit, right? Like the thing I always tweet is like, basketball gods are always watching. Like there's a limit of how far you can go with the trolling and the jokes and the trash talk before like it goes from being competitive to becoming like bad juju or like bad karma or whatever term you want to put around it. And I thought that that Clippers team, and then it got worse, right? With Marcus Morris like joining that team, because he's also a fiery, competitive guy. He's got like that the dog goon mentality, whatever you want to call it. I thought the personality of that Clippers team was going in a direction where they were like the anti, like, there's everybody wants to beat Braun. Everybody knows Braun is going to be the guy who you're going to see in the finals, depending on what conference you're at. So there's always like this, the anti-Braun hero, like the anti-hero, not a villain, but like an anti-hero for every season. And that's what the Clippers were last year. They got Kawhi, they got PG, they had all these defensive guys. They had 2 6th man of the year candidates. They're stacked. These guys are the guys that are going to prevent LeBron from getting a step closer to Michael Jordan in the tiers of championships or the GOAT legacy. And that's what people watch. People love to hate watch. They love to watch LeBron lose. I get it. And obviously LeBron's on the Lakers, so they hate us even more. So it's a match made in heaven. But it felt like at some point, Pat, because it went outside of the Lakers, because he was talking trash to Steph, because he was talking trash to Dame, and because he's a role player, okay? Like, to be fair, he's a role player. He wasn't the guy who was always closing out games for this team. I think that energy, that bad energy, pervaded that team. And it gave an opinion of that team. And we know on NBA Twitter, a lot of people were making excuses for that team when they would, when they didn't look as great as they did. And they were saying, oh, chemistry's not a problem, all that sort of stuff. We already know that all that stuff was important. And all the Clippers, everybody in that Clippers franchise saying chemistry is important. Practicing together is important. Staying healthy is important, but we can't lose, whatever synergy that we have as a team and stuff. So all the stuff that they were trying to kind of push under the rug before is now important this year because they lost. But I think Pat doing that, it just made it so easy. And I've always said, like, I didn't watch LeBron intensely, only on national media prior to him coming to LA. But the one thing you can do, which is probably the worst thing you could possibly do when it comes to LeBron James, considering all the accomplishments he has as an individual in this game, is give him like some sort of motivation, like give him a chip on his shoulder. It's different when the fans do it on Twitter, right? Because he can just be like, I'm above this, right? But when a player does it on the court, historically, Sean Stevenson's done it. There's other players that have talked trash to him directly to his face. Like, I think Toronto, there's a story about somebody on the bench in Toronto saying something to LeBron, and then LeBron just lighting up the whole team and stuff like that. Like, you cannot give a guy like him motivation. Like, he's a dad. Like, dads know what their priorities are in life. You know what I mean? Like, they got their kids, their wives. They got to do their jobs. They got to deal with other stuff. They don't need any sort of motivation. But when you give Braun that motivation, like you give him that chip on his shoulder, it's a problem. And he's right. Pat spoke on behalf of the entire Clippers franchise because Kawhi and Paul George didn't. And he put a huge target on that team's back. And that's the biggest egg on their face, right? It's not just losing a series before you get to the Lakers. The way they lost is really bad too, as well.
Oh, they were humiliated, man. That's an ugly way. It isn't like they blew a 3-1 lead to the Lakers or to another team that was supposed to be as good or better than them. They lost in the second round to a team that they were basically outplaying for like the first 3 games, and then they for whatever reason they couldn't figure it out. And then in the aftermath of that, not only did the Lakers go on to win, the team that they were supposed to be better than, but the head coach gets fired. Then Paul George starts blaming the head coach for the way he was played.
Mm-hmm.
An article comes out that talks about how the franchise is in disarray. All these things start happening around the team, and it's just like, maybe you guys should have just kept your mouth shut and played ball throughout the regular season. That probably would have been the best thing. And maybe you just should have flown under the radar instead of trying. I know they did the whole "we over me" campaign thing, but like, everything they did really almost seemed like they were trying to be as big as the Lakers. And they probably should have just minded their own business, been the quieter team in LA, and just played. And I think that they found themselves so as much as I think the Pat Bev put a target on the Clippers, like on his teammates' back, so did ESPN, Fox, Yahoo, New York Times, LA. Everybody put a target on them because they were anointing them before they had done anything.
So that's why that RJ story is so funny, because he's describing the moment that PG hit the side of the backboard in Game 7.
Yep.
And they were already down by a lot at that point. They were like basically trying to make a comeback themselves. And I thought it was so funny because you know how anti-Woj I've been the entire time, and how like I was like, yo, why is ESPN just blatantly just ignoring the fact that there's a better LA team, or like as good of an LA team there, and just saying that like all these issues that the Clippers have are we don't have to worry about them. And I just thought it was such a great story to hear RJ say that he turned around and the faces he saw were Rachel Nichols and Woj. Yep. Malika Andrews, I don't think she says anything bad about the Lakers or pro Clippers. But Rachel Nichols specifically, and Woj were the two names that I couldn't stop laughing when I heard them, because, you know, Woj is a newsbreaker, but it is very clear that he has connections to the Clippers front office based on the news that he drops. And, you know, he was sort of playing this antagonist role on NBA Twitter. He was always including the Lakers for like names of people that they were never interested in. Like they were, you know, when people were chasing Reggie Jackson, everybody on Lakers Twitter is like, no, we know who Reggie Jackson's agent is. We know Reggie Jackson's best friend is Paul George. He's not coming to the Lakers. But Woj kept saying, oh, the Lakers are trying to get him. The Lakers trying to get him, trying to make it seem like there was a two-horse race. Clearly it wasn't. The Lakers had completely different plans instead of Reggie Jackson. So that dynamic was just hilarious. Just to hear that story was hilarious. And again, with Richard's response, like the way he poses this question, LeBron, it is very clear that Richard Jefferson is the guy who's sending all this stuff to LeBron and just messing with him all the time. It sounds like Channing Frye and Richard Jefferson were sending, like they're deliberately going on air and not picking the Lakers because that's what everybody else is doing. And then they're just trolling LeBron, like in their group chats or whatever, just making fun of him, because like even they knew, they're like, you know, like people are obviously just going to pick against you guys. So I'm just going to do it just for kicks and to have fun. So he's not even taking that like, he's basically saying, I wasn't taking Denver seriously. I didn't think that they would beat you guys. But I picked Denver anyways, just so I can mess with Braun, you know, afterwards and stuff like that. So it's that story is funny. And Braun's right. You shouldn't have said all that. You shouldn't have done that. You shouldn't have put a billboard in front of the Lakers practice facility. Like you cannot you cannot ignore the human element of what happens. And, you know, basically the story for the Clippers last season is they got complacent. They thought they had it in the bag, and then they lost not only historic fashion, but every single one of those games they had double digits leads that they kept blowing. So it was the same thing over and over and over again. So, you know, it is what it is now. And just like it is in wars, just like it is in political elections, the victors get to write the story. So LeBron gets to say what he wants to say about them now because they won.
He does, and LeBron also goes on to talk about wanting his respect. And he talked about, you know, Jeannie being the first female owner to win a championship. He talks about people saying that, you know, Rob Pelinka only got the job because of his relationship with Kobe, and now he's won a championship. Even LeBron, despite all the things he'd done before winning this Lakers championship, he talked about people, you know, kicking the Lakers the last 7 years or so. I mean, do you think that – well, let me take it even a step further. He said that, you know, he's played in two of the most difficult championship series ever. The 2016 coming back 3-1, you know, against the 73-9 Warriors, and now this time winning the bubble. And he said, if you didn't play in that bubble, you don't know what it was like. 96 days away from his children. You know, his wife was ultimately able to come in, but he said, you know, your routine gets altered. And when he was talking about his routine, I thought, okay, especially at his age, he's got a specific routine to get his body right before these games. And this bubble, deviated from that, and maybe the younger guys who can kind of just wake up and play, the really young guys, but the older superstars, they're regimented in how they go about their business. And so people making fun of it and calling it a Mickey Mouse ring. No, I from the beginning, I thought that this one was going to be really, really difficult, not to mention the stuff with social justice going on in the background, the stuff with the pandemic going on in the background. This was going to be difficult. So I think that, look, I don't know if he's the greatest player of all time. I was a child when Michael was in his prime doing his thing. I'm not one of these blog boys that was born in 1995 who, like, their reference for greatness is a little bit different from what mine is. I've always said that, are you at the table? And once you're at the table, it could go either way, and LeBron is at the table. I don't have a definitive number one, but he's at the table. And breathing life back into this Lakers organization with all the stuff that I just said, I don't know what else he's supposed to do. I mean, if they repeat, I'd love that to happen, but I don't. His naysayers are going to be his naysayers. His believers are going to be his believers. The same thing with Kobe. The same thing with Michael Jordan. The same thing with any superstar. Like, what's he going to do to prove the doubters wrong? Nothing at this point, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's at this point, it's not. And this is why I feel sort of confident that they have a really good chance, assuming everybody stays healthy and assuming because health is the most important thing. Things break their way. The reason why I think they have a really, really great chance to repeat is because the pressure of chasing a championship in Los Angeles is like, the intensity of that is whatever you think it is times like 100.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't have to look much farther than like what happened to like Danny Green and his 1 year experience in LA. There is incredible, like, the expectations in Los Angeles are, aside from just deliver championships, is just do your job, right? Yep. Like, Laker fans have been going back and forth all over Kuzma. Some games he does well, some games he doesn't. We're frustrated with his inconsistency. We hope he's consistent, with all these new additions, that he can be more consistent this upcoming year. But the expectations are always high. And when you add a guy like LeBron James, your expectations will always be incredibly high. There has to be some sort of credit given to LeBron for, even though the Lakers were not a good franchise for like the 5 or 6 years prior, we were basically tanking and collecting picks and collecting talent. There needs to be, I don't know how you quantify it, but there needs to be credit given to a guy who looks at a franchise and a fan base and goes, oh shit, if I don't deliver a championship to this franchise, it is actually going to hurt my legacy, because this is one of the biggest franchises in the league. This is one of the greatest franchises of all, in the hierarchy of the NBA. And there is a lineage of greatest of all time players, guys that are on that list, 1 to 20, 1 to 10, whatever, that are on that list that have recently played for this franchise. You have to give some credit to LeBron James for going to Los Angeles and saying, I'm going to help deliver a championship here. And he says that. He said that he wanted to be part of the change of making this franchise great and whatever. So when people turn around and say, well, the Lakers sucked, so obviously LeBron going there would automatically improve them. Yeah, we sucked. But look at what we're comparing him to. We're not comparing him to like Brandon Ingram and Lonzo Ball and D'Angelo Russell's levels. We're comparing him to Kobe Bryant, to Magic Johnson, to Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Mm-hmm. There is something to be said about a player of his caliber willingly going from probably one of the worst run franchises in the history of the NBA and going to one of the best run franchises in terms of winning in the history of the NBA, and being willing to shoulder that sort of intensity. And this is not even including, obviously the stuff that happened with Kobe, Kobe's passing and all that sort of stuff. It is incredibly difficult. And so for me, the reason why I feel like they're playing with house money now is because they won it. Year one with Anthony Davis, they won it. And they know the blueprint works. They know that the same environment that everybody was saying is a pure basketball environment. No distractions. All you have to do is hoop and the best basketball player is going to win the championship. That's what people were saying when the bubble came up. Everybody said that the bubble is whoever is the best basketball, hoops, nothing else. The best basketball team and the best basketball players are going to win the championship in this environment because there's no distractions. That's all people were saying until the Lakers won. And that's when it turned into a Mickey Mouse championship because the Lakers won. And that has been the theme and will continue to be the theme until the Lakers don't win. Every single time you have somebody who's the anti-Laker hero or the anti-Bron hero, whenever you guys pick somebody, whenever NBA Twitter decides who they want to go with or NBA media decides who that is the person that is going to be championed until they run into the Lakers. And when the Lakers beat them, they'll become trash or it won't be valued as much anymore or it won't matter as much anymore. And to all the Laker fans out there who hate that exercise, that feel that they have to constantly prove themselves over and over again, I am telling you, and you don't have to follow what I'm saying, but I'm just going to give you my personal experience. I went through this same shit 20 years ago when Shaq and Kobe were three-peating their championships. Every single year, there was one or two other teams that would always be championed as, oh, these guys could beat the Lakers. And some could, like the Spurs with Duncan and stuff like that. They were a formidable team to stop the Lakers. And they did at some times stop the Lakers from getting to the finals. But every single time that happened and those teams got bounced, it was an afterthought. And for the conversation that seems to be happening, and I genuinely, I don't know what your opinion is on this, but like this hardest championship versus easiest championship and stuff like that. Like a lot of people are saying, well, all the championships are hard, right? All championships are very difficult to get to. The road to a championship, for sure, is hard. But playing in the NBA Finals versus playing a team in the Western Conference versus, early teams and stuff like that, like there is a difference. There was a point in the NBA after Michael Jordan left or retired for good where the Western Conference Finals were basically the NBA Finals.
Yep.
And some of those battles were ridiculous battles that the Lakers ended up on top of and some that they didn't win. So telling me that the NBA Finals for one team versus another team is harder or not hard or easier. Look, I remember Shaq and Kobe going up against the Sixers, and I was thinking to myself, oh, they're going to sweep them. And part of Allen Iverson's lore, like that aura that he has, is that he took one game off the Lakers. He took that game one off the Lakers.
I think he had 48 that game.
Yeah, and he was absurd. He has a famous moment where he steps over Ty Lue. People have built this mythos, like this mythology about themselves over beating the Lakers. And a big part of Allen Iverson's legacy is that, we don't talk about the teams they had to run through in the East, whether they were difficult or not difficult. If you had to ask Allen Iverson if that was a tough not a championship, but like a tough NBA Finals for him, I'm pretty sure he would say, yeah, that was a really tough NBA Finals for him. Maybe not for the Lakers, but that's just how the East and the West stacked up. I remember when they eventually played the New Jersey Nets. I was graduating high school or something like that at the time. I was just oh, they're going to sweep this team. I didn't even watch one of the games because I just knew that Shaq. And then there's this famous picture of 5 guys trying to block Shaq at the rim as he's dunking on the entire Nets team. So obviously there are easy championships and there are difficult championships. But I think that is something that players get to decide. I don't think that's something that we as fans get to decide because we're not the ones who are participating in those environments. And Brian clearly said when he answers that question, it was about him. The reason why it was difficult for him and he thought it was the hardest is because he is a routine guy. He has a regimen and a routine that he follows strictly. And that's what has led to him being so successful in his career, and especially in terms of his health and stuff like that. And he had to deviate from that significantly because of the bubble. And so that's why it was hard for him. I know Dame Lillard said it was an easy environment for him because there's no distractions, which is probably fair. But those two things can be those aren't mutually exclusive. It may the bubble may not have been hard because there's no distractions, but it may have also been hard because you didn't get maybe for Dame it's easier for him to concentrate on basketball when he's away from his family. Maybe for LeBron he needs to go home and decompress with his family to get his mind off of basketball. There's so many different ways to approach it. So the only reason I hate that conversation is because it was originally a troll conversation that has now become like something that like NBA players have to acknowledge. But look, man, like I said, after the Clipper thing, the Lakers won. LeBron won. He gets to dictate whether it was hard or not. It doesn't matter what you guys think. And people will debate it on their podcasts, and they'll debate it in barbershops, like you said, and stuff like that. So who cares? In the end, the Lakers are champs. So I'm not sweating any of it. I'm looking forward to enjoying this upcoming season.
Lakers are champs, and that's what's good for the NBA. And despite whatever people think of this particular championship, frankly, whatever people think of LeBron's ranking all time, it's hard to win 6 championships. That's why, just in terms of the superstars, that's why like Russell, who has 11, Jordan has 6, and Magic has 5, Kobe has 5, Shaq has 4, Duncan has 5. Like, it's hard to get that many rings as a superstar.
Mm-hmm.
And if LeBron is if in his mind he's trying to chase or pass Jordan or whatever, he might not be able to do it by actually matching the number of championships. But bringing the first one to Cleveland, that obviously matters. They hadn't won one in like 60 years. Breathing life back into the Lakers, that's going to obviously matter. If they repeat, that's going to clearly matter. Those are ways that you possibly match Jordan. But look, regardless of what people think of him versus Jordan, him versus anybody else, like, I've come to appreciate all these guys on their own, and I was not a LeBron guy pre-Lakers. I respected what the dude had done, but I was not a LeBron guy. But what I try not to do now is pit any of these otherworldly superstars against each other. Like, I have no desire to do that, especially in the wake of losing Kobe Bryant the way that we did. Like, you better appreciate LeBron, because I understand that there's Luka and there's other guys out there that's young and up and coming, Zion. But like, an injury could derail their careers, and they might not ever be an all-time great, right? Like, we have no idea. Like, LeBron is one of the few guys who literally came out of high school and lived up to the hype. Very few actually do that. So I'm happy he's a Laker, and I'm happy that he acknowledges all these things, and I'm happy that he's as candid as he is. He's one of the more candid athletes I think that we have in our generation, and I don't know, for him to be as big as he is, and for him to speak as freely as he does. I know he doesn't just say anything. He's measured. He's very much like President Obama. Like, he thinks things through before he says it.
Yeah, absolutely.
But he's pretty open when he just, like, he didn't have to talk about the Kyrie thing. Like, he could have told them, hey, I'm not going to, I have no desire to talk about it. He chose otherwise. So I'm looking forward to this season. We got our first preseason game on Friday. I think Vogel said AD and LeBron probably won't play, which is fine. Give those guys their breaks. I'm happy to see what Trez and Schroeder and Kuz and THT and all those guys look like, if those guys play. But any parting words, Vinay?
I posted this on the timeline earlier today, but, the Lakers winning a championship last season has me in a very peaceful place, mentally, emotionally. I know for other folks, they feel the same way, and I know for other folks, they really want to get that second back-to-back championship, and keep this train rolling for as long as we possibly can. But like you said, all I can tell you is the best thing you can do is just enjoy the season day by day. I'm not going to rack my brain over the regular season. I think health is going to be the most important part. Staying COVID free and all that sort of stuff is going to be the most important part of this season. I'm going to be looking at these guys in terms of like, all right, is the fit good? Is the chemistry good? Are these guys, playing well in the small things that we want them to play well? That sort of thing. So I'm not going to be looking at it from like a wins and loss perspective. I'm sure we'll get annoyed if they lose a couple games here and there and stuff like that, but I don't need them going balls to the wall. And of course, as always, I understand Laker fans expect, like excellence every game. It all just comes down to how you watch them. But I'm at peace, man. Like, I'm going to enjoy this season. It's going to be the first time I'm going to be like, first time in a long time where I'm going to be like watching a regular season and just like, oh, that's nice. Oh, that's cool. damn, sucks that didn't go our way or something like that, as opposed to, oh my God, we need to get this correct. We have to get this fixed. We have to get this. He has to be better when it comes to this because we have to win a championship. When you win a championship, that kind of stuff, for me at least personally, kind of goes away. So my suggestion to Laker fans, of course, you never have to take my advice if you don't want to, is just enjoy the regular season, man. Like, the NBA didn't give us enough time to celebrate a championship, obviously because of the pandemic. We couldn't show up in droves to the parade. So it's going to be a season-long enjoyment for me. That doesn't mean we can't be critical of, Kyle Kuzma's inconsistency or if somebody plays poorly. It just means that, I won't take it as seriously because this front office has shown that they'll make the moves they need to move to be better. This coaching staff has made it clear that they'll make the moves that they need to make it better. And we have the two best leaders in the game of basketball in LeBron James and Anthony Davis. And I trust them to get us to the promised line when we need them to, when it's time to go. So that's all I got, man. I'm looking forward to the preseason games, and Lakers Twitter is in overdrive. But we're already doing analysis and battling other franchises and stuff like that on the timeline. So always proud of Lakers Twitter and what they do.
Well, I'll close out with this. Not being able to celebrate physically, this championship just means when we repeat, it'll be even better when we're out in the streets being able to celebrate. It's going to be mayhem if the Lakers repeat, and that's the first time that, they can have a parade and all that stuff. So,
you know what? I have one of my really, really good friends. He's a hardcore Dodger. I don't know anybody that's a more hardcore Dodgers fan than he is. And we ran into each other in passing, and I asked him, I was like, yo, you think the Dodgers can repeat? And he's just like, and he's a Laker fan too. He's like, oh yeah, they could definitely repeat. I was like, oh shit, what happens if they both repeat? What if LA repeats again? And we're just, same thing as you. We're like, the entire city's going on fire, man. They're setting every single car on fire. That's what's gonna happen. So, I'm looking forward to it, man.
I'll be in LA if they repeat. I will definitely be in LA at least for a week if they repeat. So stay safe, Laker fans. We'll close out on that. You've been listening to Laker Central.